Okay, so for anybody who's new here, I'm Sarah McKenzie. I'm the author of Teaching from Rest, A Homeschooler's Guide to Unshakable Peace, the creator of the Read-Aloud Revival, and the podcast and the membership program. And this is a book club we're doing on Teaching from Rest. This is the third in the series. Teaching from Rest is it's a pretty slim little volume, and it's split up into 3 parts. So in our first part of the book club, and you can watch all of the first 2 book club periscopes are on replay at sarahmckenzie.tv. Oh, Tiffany, I saw you in the membership. I'm so glad you joined. I'm glad you love it. I'm really glad. That's definitely where my heart is, so I'm really glad you're there. So yeah, if you missed either the first or the second, Alicia, hello girl. So fun to meet you in Williamsburg. If you missed either the first 2 book clubs, you can watch them at sarahmckenzie.tv. The first one, we tackled the first part of the book, which is whose well done are you working for? And in that one, we talked about how to reframe interruptions, what it means to be building a cathedral in the middle of a monotonous Monday, what it means to bring our basket and bring everything we have to our homeschooling. And we talked about rest as the virtue between negligence and anxiety. And then in part 2, we talked about curriculum is not something you buy. We got a little bit more practical. We got a little bit more nitty gritty. So when we always say the best thing to do if you're feeling overwhelmed in your homeschool is to cut back and do less, how do you actually do that? How do you know what to keep and what to let go of? And so we talked about how do you know? And the biggest piece of that was that you have to know where you are going. Thank you, Homeschool Realm. You said you were blown away by part 2. I'm so glad. My heart really is with that whole clarifying your vision, getting really clear on the words you want your children to use when they're describing their homeschool experience 20 years from now, because I think that's how we build the homeschool of our dreams. I think that's how we make our homeschool come alive in a way that it maybe doesn't look the same as it would have when we were first setting out on homeschooling. We had all these kind of unrealistic expectations for ourselves and our children. So maybe it doesn't look like that, but maybe it looks better because we're taking the long view. And then making sure we're getting really, really, really clear on the limitations of published resources. And we can only do that, I think, when we are super clear on where we're going. Because oh, you asked your kids the words they would want to say too. I love that. I love that. That is a great idea. Yeah, and I think the reason that we kind of fall prey to using published resources, giving them more power in a different place than they're meant to have, is because we aren't very clear on our vision. So we get clear on our vision, we can release ourselves from being slaves to our published resources. So, and then we talked about how to let go of what to let go of, how to figure out what to hold on to, which is going to look a little bit different for all of us. Oh, thanks for sharing with your friends, inviting your friends. I really appreciate that. Okay, we're going to talk about that. Starting a School Age Sisters group, can it be done online? Yes. My School Age Sisters group is virtual. None of us live in the same town, so I'll talk about that a little bit tonight. Okay, I'm going to try and catch questions too. And maybe actually I'll ask toward the end. Feel free to throw questions up as we go along. Sometimes I miss comments as they're rolling by really fast and I'm talking. But at the end, I'll try and make sure that I say, like, let's ask questions. And then if at the end of the scope you feel like I didn't get your question, and I know that some people can't even comment because we get enough people in here, they close comments. So we put these replays up at amongstlovelythings.com. or sarahmckenzie.tv is probably the better place to find it. And you can always put your questions in the comments, and I'm trying to answer those too. So if you don't get your question and answer tonight, you can always hit me up there. This is the book that's changing your paradigm. I'm so glad. Kind of changed mine too as I was writing it. Oh, God has a funny way of doing that. Thanks for the link, for putting the links in there, ladies. Okay, so the heart of part 3 is really that I have, in all this time, you know, as I'm talking to homeschool moms who are done or who are, they have at least some of their kids have graduated from homeschooling. And I ask them, constantly have this habit of asking them, what's the most important thing that you did? Or what's the thing that you regret doing? What do you wish you had made more time for? All these questions, these hard questions that I'm sure they wish I'd stop asking them, but they're like gold mines because they have that 20-year perspective that I'm craving. And so as I've been asking them that, the one thing that really, really sticks with me, those two things. The one thing is they almost always tell me to simplify, that I'm doing way too much. And I don't have a homeschool where we're doing a whole lot. I mean, if you looked at my homeschool curriculum, you wouldn't think this is one of those ladies that like does a million. I really don't. But they still tell me to simplify. They still tell me you're doing too much. You feel like you're having to like spin your wheels. So that's number one. And that's what we tackled last week. The other thing they say is that you, Mama, and me, we are the most important component of our homeschool. That if we are peaceful and content and cheerful, that goes way, way, way further than any other thing that we could do in our homeschool. And so it almost, one of the moms I talked to has 10 kids, and she told me, I almost feel like, this is what she told me, whatever curriculum you use doesn't even matter. Just pick something and stick with it. This is what she said. And at the time she told me this, she was using a very boxed out traditional school curriculum. And she said, the most important thing is me. They're imitating me. And if I am peaceful and content and cheerful and consistent, that's important too. Not just like, happy-go-lucky, but also consistent, then our homeschool goes off well. And so, that's the biggest heart of part 3, that the heart of a really successful, happy homeschool is that we're peaceful and content. Okay, so what I wanted to read to you is from page 56, and I see some people going, ouch, and I totally understand that. I am not pointing at you, I am pointing at myself squarely here. And my daughter sitting in the room is probably rolling her eyes thinking, that's exactly what you should have told yourself earlier today, Mom. So I completely understand. It's so tricky. I'm just watching all these lovely comments roll by. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so page 56, I'm going to read to you from The Truth About You. Several years ago, I was told by a lady that she could never homeschool because she wasn't a salt dough map-making kind of mom. I get that. Nothing makes me groan like reading in a set of lesson plans, complex instructions telling me how to mummify a chicken or create a raised relief depiction of Egypt. Truth be told, I'm not all that convinced that homeschooling mothers need to engage in such elaborate activities to make learning worthwhile. A few years into homeschooling, one thing is abundantly clear to me. A peaceful and happy mother is the real key to successful homeschooling. Choosing excellent materials is important, of course. Establishing a healthy daily routine is enormously helpful. Developing an active social life is essential. We can read up on every curriculum on the market, listen to podcasts, devour articles, attend conferences, participate in co-ops or support groups, but none of this will have the same impact on the life of a homeschooling family as a peaceful and happy mother. To become peaceful and happy, you've got to figure out what's true about you. What creates an environment in which you can thrive? How can you work with your own innate strengths and weaknesses so that your homeschool will be happy and humming, even if you never construct a sugar cube pyramid or help your kids put together a single diorama? I'm not doing either, ever. Yes, there are oodles of blogs in which crafty moms showcase all the incredibly wonderful things they're doing with their kids. Good for them. And I don't mean that sarcastically at all. I really do mean good for them. What beauty to watch a mom thrive alongside her children. But there is more than one way. If you aren't a crafty mom, if the thought of letting your child loose with a can of glitter and a bottle of glue makes you break out in hives, join the club. And then shut your internet browser and quit looking at Pinterest. When I wrote this book, I said Pinterest. Today I might say quit looking at Instagram. Long enough to figure out what would help you thrive. I have spent a lot of time, too much actually, thinking about my children's learning styles. I've pondered how to meet their unique needs and provide them with learning opportunities based on their own interests. It never occurred to me during all that reading and pondering that I just might burn out if I didn't consider my own personality and my own teaching style as well. If I'm not thriving as a homeschooling mother, my students are going to suffer for it. Okay. You love glitter. That's awesome. I want to love glitter so badly. So here's the thing. I just met all these amazing women at Wild and Free, right? Like I was telling you. And one of the things that I came away from that is I was kind of cruising through Instagram looking at all these women I had just met and their beautiful lives. And one of the things that I kept coming back to is how different we are all made. I mean, we always talk about comparison being the thief of joy, and then we all turn to social media and start looking at everybody else's through everybody else's windows. I don't think there's anything wrong with social media. Don't get me wrong. I'm on social media. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think we have to stop that conversation in our head when we start telling ourselves things like, I need to XYZ in order to be as good of a mom as her. Because that's not going to get us anywhere. And also, I think it's just crucially important that we remember that God did not choose that mother for your children. He chose you. And so I have to remember this, but when I would pretty much always just rather sit and read with my kids than do anything that required more energy than that, or a mess. And so I have to be okay with that. Now, hold on. There's another thing I wanted to, okay, yes. Another thing I wanted to say kind of in that. So I think it's super important that we thrive as we embrace who we are. Yes, comparison is the thief of all joy. That's what I had said. Comparison is the thief of all joy. And when we compare ourselves with the other moms we see on social media or at our homeschool group or in the grocery store, we aren't listening to God. Because you can't listen to God nourish you how you are and help you grow in your own life while you're envying and coveting another woman's life, right? Or another woman's personality. So even like, if it's not necessarily that I wish I was more crafty or I wish I did really fun, cute birthday parties, even though I totally am the lamest birthday mom on the face of the planet, or things like that, even if it's just I crave somebody else's personality, that's not what God gave you. And so you can't be sitting there and listening to God. I can't listen to what God has to say to me if I'm so busy trying to be somebody else. Now, one of the things that kind of is tricky here is that we don't want to fall into the habit then of saying, well, this is just how God made me, so my kids aren't going to get any crafts or, projects at all because I'm not a craft or project mom. And one of my experienced homeschool moms kind of caught me on that last year. I had gotten to this default of saying, I'm a read and discuss kind of mom. I love talking with my kids. I love having conversations about books. And she said, well, maybe, but remember that your kids aren't all like you and they may need something else too. So it's really important to know that about yourself. And then it's also really important to say, okay, this child seems like, one of my daughters is super crafty, very project-y. She would love it if we did, project-based unit study kind of stuff all the time. And we don't. But I do try to think, okay, is there a way that I can tie that in every once in a while for her? Or is there another teacher that I can bring, I can take her to another teacher's class or sign her up for an art class at the community center? Or when we're brainstorming for co-op, can I say, okay, can we do a project class? Because I'm the worst project mom and I have a kid who needs projects. So it's not about saying like, tough luck kids, you got me and this is the way God made me. Because we have to grow and stretch too. And so one of the things that I had this big conversation with Andrew Kern about personality types. It was probably close to a year ago now. Because I'm kind of into the whole Myers-Briggs personality type thing. And Andrew is not. And he told me why he isn't. It makes complete sense. He said he felt like Christians especially tend to say, okay, I am this personality type. I am an ENFJ, and therefore I don't XYZ. I don't need all that much time alone, or I don't have a really active, like, vibrant, quiet prayer life because I'm an extrovert, or I don't know. I can't think of anything off the cuff, but we tend to lean on our personality types as a crutch, and he said, that's tricky because we are called to grow in virtue. We're called to grow in in how God made us. He made us a certain way, but he also wants us to grow. So on page 59, I said, knowing the truth about you doesn't mean that you are who you are and that you aren't being called to stretch and grow appropriately. One of the pitfalls of taking an assessment of our vices and virtues is that we often lean on them as a crutch. If I know that my own tendency is to fly by the seat of my pants and fail to spend some time on the front end, prayerfully and carefully setting a course for our year, theoretically speaking, of course, I can either use that knowledge to improve upon my weakness and grow in virtue, or I can lean on it as an excuse to keep doing what I've been doing. There's a fine balance here between knowing about yourself so that you may grow in virtue and overcome sin, and knowing about yourself and leaning on those vices as excuses. That said, figure out what drives you and then let your kids shine within the atmosphere you create. Trying to be something you're not, trying hard to provide your kids with the education that the homeschooler next door is giving hers, will burn you out and make you want to quit the whole project entirely. You've got to remember who you are and whose you are. So in your companion journal, there is a spot where you can, I'll show you. If you have a companion journal and you print it out, that's the way it's the most helpful. Doesn't do you a whole lot of good if it's stuck on your hard drive, just so you know. Print it out. Let's see. I don't think I filled mine out because my who I am is pretty much in the book, yeah. There's a spot where I say, think about your own personality and teaching style. And I told you in the book on pages 57 and 58 what's true about me, so what's true about you. And just dump it out. Anything you can think of. Things that light you on fire, things that you get excited about. When you're planning for a new homeschool year, what's the thing that you're most excited to order first? That when the curriculum gets dropped on your door, you can't wait to dig into it. Write that down. All those different pieces. And then you can kind of step away from it for a day or two and come back to it and look at it and go, okay, how can I make my homeschool like really flourish in this capacity? Because this is the way God made me. And then where do I see any weaknesses here? Is there any way that I can music? Oh, I love that, Michelle. Is there any ways that I can see and not all the bad things, right? Yes. Okay, Dawn says that's where she starts with the bad things. No starting with your weaknesses. List out the things that light you on fire. List out the things that you know you're good at that make you want to homeschool your kids. That you think, okay, this is why what are those things that when you're doing them, you go, this is why we homeschool. So we can do this. That's how I feel like when I'm reading aloud to my kids in the middle of the day with hot chocolate. I feel like this is why we're homeschooling. Or when we're on a really awesome, well, we had like some friends over for co-op last week and we did this whole Boston tea. I did not lift a finger, so I can't take credit for this, but my kids got to do this whole tea party thing while they were learning about the Boston Tea Party. And I thought, this is why we homeschool, because this is such an amazing experience for my kids and they'll remember this forever. So things like that, write those kinds of things down. And then you can step away from it for a few days and you can come back and you can look and you can see where your weaknesses are and then just fill in those back gaps. You don't have to fill them in yourself, by the way. You can hire them out or you can outsource in your community. Science is a really weak area for me. Like it would be really difficult for me to get excited enough to inspire my kids. And my kids really like science. So that's one of the things we do at co-op. I don't hire it out so much as at our homeschool co-op, one of the other moms who totally digs science and is really excited, enthusiastic about it, teaches it. So you can kind of see those weaknesses and you don't have to fill all the gaps, but it'll help you kind of take a step back and know where you can help your kids shine. And then actually on another page in the companion journal, I say to list all your kids. Your children are not projects. They're images. Oh God, I need that. I need to tell myself that all the time. My kids are not projects because we tend to see them that way, right? All the things we need to fix in them, all the ways we're going to make them better, all the content we need to drop into their head, all the virtues we want them to embrace, but they're not actually our projects. They are images of God, beautiful persons designed to glorify Him, not to do parlor tricks, score well on tests, or get into Ivy League colleges. So write down each of your children's names and list 5 things you love about each child. Things that will help you see them as fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image. If you pair writing the things about you that light you on fire and that are true about you with 5 things that you love about your kids. I mean, one of the things I put on that crafty, projecty daughters is she sees beauty in the most ordinary moments. Oh, she's always creative and she can always turn something into a project. So seeing those things and then comparing them to where my strengths are, it makes it much easier for me to think, okay, how can I fill in this gap for this child? Okay. I love that. You call your 2-year-old daughter a train wreck lovingly. Yes, I totally get that. So funny. She's so caring. That's right. She's tenderhearted. Yeah, good to ask older kids what lights them on fire. I love that. I love the idea of asking your kids what words they want to remember their homeschool by, and also just every once in a while saying, if we could do anything in the whole world in our homeschool, what would you, like next week, what would you want to do? And if they say something like go to, Spain, well, okay, you can't do that next week, but you could kind of dig into that, read into that a little bit. Maybe they just need an adventure. Maybe they want to go have some kind of adventurous field trip and eat at a Mexican restaurant, and that would be fun in the middle of the school day, just because you can, because they're not in school, and because you can go to Mexican lunch in the middle of the school day, and that's fun. That would not be fun for me because I have 3 kids, 3 and under. That would be awful, actually. But if you ask your kids, Skype with your Spanish friends at your house, or make paella. Is that how you say that? Boys definitely want to eat. If they say, I really, really want to make, I don't know what my son might say, like a, what are those shooter guns called? Like a rubber band shooter, or I really want to make like a carve a sword or something. I mean, you can run with it. You can kind of dig into it and think, what's one thing that we could do that would, a slingshot, goodness. I know, it's not even that late here. If you are able to so I can't be a project mom because that's just not the way God made me, and it's really difficult, but I can find out what my kids really, really want and give them each that. So if my daughter really, really wants to make a diorama, that's really what she wants to do, then if I tell myself we're going to make one diorama this year and it's going to be awesome, and we're going to do it at Thanksgiving so we can do the whole first Thanksgiving or something with, colonial plantation or something, then in my head I can wrap my mind around it. I don't have to then buy an entire unit study curriculum where we're making all of these projects. We're just doing one, right? But it's something that they'll remember forever. We have this weird tendency, I think, as not just as homeschooling moms, but just as moms, to think we have to do something all the time in order for it to count. I was just telling somebody this. In my head, when my husband asked me, like, did your family go camping when you were a kid? I'm like, oh yeah, we went camping. No, we went camping once when I was, I think something around 8 at a KOA. So it wasn't even like in the wilderness or anything. It was at a KOA with like a golf club, a mini golf course and a pool. In my head, that was such a wonderful memory, and it still is such a wonderful memory for me, that I think when I was a kid, we went camping. And that still nourishes me, those memories. You don't have to make dinner from scratch every single night for your kids to grow up and say, my mom cooked from scratch, right? So think about that in your homeschool too. You don't have to make a project for every single thing you study in history for your kids to think, when I was a kid, we made some really cool projects in history. So just give yourself some grace there. Yes, a part of the beauty of homeschooling is being able to be flexible and change things up. I agree completely. Okay. So the other thing that we all need to just relax. Yeah, we put so much pressure on ourselves to perform at this really, really high level. Okay, so on page 61, there's an important distinction in here about rest and leisure. Trying to find it. Okay. Well, I'm going to start reading on page 60 because I saw Andrew Kern over here. And I have to read that part too. Okay, so basically I'm on page 60, I start talking about how Andrew Kern, you've heard him say this before if you've heard Andrew Kern. If not, one of the things that he has taught me that I tell myself all the time is, you become what you behold. and they're beholding you. He says the most important thing every teacher should understand is that teaching is the art of being imitated. If you want a student to perceive a truth, you have to embody it. That's what teaching is. When you teach, whether you intend to or not, you are saying to your students, imitate me. So that equally encourages and terrifies me. Because we know that then if we want our kids to be able to dig deep and read and be passionate about learning, and we have to imitate that ourselves. And that is really freeing in that we think the most important job as a teacher is to be worthy of imitation. It's not to get a certain number of subjects or content into a child by a certain age. So it's freeing in that it should free us from thinking that we have to cover certain subjects in 4th grade and 5th grade and 6th grade and 7th grade. And it's terrifying because this is such a bigger job than that, right? It's so much more than that. So this is then Dr. Perrin really helped me understand. Your guys' comments are cracking me up. Help me understand what rest and leisure means. Now, one of the books that Dr. Perrin told me when I was writing this book, he told me you have to read it in order to understand what teaching from rest means, is Leisure, the Basis of Culture by Josef Pieper. So tell me in the chat, say give me a yes if you've read it. A try, tell me try if you tried. Because it's not light reading. It's really, I was going to bring it down here and I forgot. It's really short. Yep, Leisure, the Basis of Culture. Page turner alert? What do you mean, Pan? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so Josef Pieper was this German philosopher, and it's short, but it's not light reading. And so that's what I thought. Okay. Pam's being sarcastic. I'm like, page turner alert. What on earth? You totally don't have to read it. So I have heard some people say you've got to read Leisure, the Basis of Culture. You don't really. That's why I kind of wrote Teaching from Rest, is because I was trying to process it as I was reading it. So don't feel discouraged if you start to read it and think, oh my gosh, I can't, get my mind around this. But let me tell you, Dr. Perrin was one of the ones who really helped me understand what Josef Pieper meant when he says that leisure is the basis of culture. So this is straight from Dr. Perrin. He says, when God rested after 6 days of creation, he was not tired. This is kind of a synopsis. Somebody asked for a synopsis. This is kind of a synopsis of Leisure, the Basis of Culture in Dr. Perrin's words. When God rested after 6 days of creation, he was not tired. He celebrated and blessed his creation. The Sabbath rest and the regular feasts were not given so that God's people would do nothing, though it did mean ceasing from typical daily labor. Rather, it was meant as a time for a particular kind of robust activity, feasting, celebration, and blessing. The Sabbath rest is not the mere cessation of labor, but the orientation of the human to his highest end. Read that again. The Sabbath rest is not the mere cessation of labor, but the orientation of the human to his highest end. The work of leisure, the work of praising, serving, feasting, and blessing. So rest is not the opposite of work. And we have to remember that, because if we think rest is the opposite of work, we will never feel like we are teaching from rest or mothering from rest or living a blessed day of a life of a mother from rest, because there's always work. But it's work of a different order. It's work directed toward our highest end, and that is to glorify God. Celebrating, yes, oh, that's so good, Dawn. Leisure is stopping providing sustenance, but celebrating God's provision. Ah, that's gorgeous. Someone needs to write that down for me, please, because I won't be able to write it before it's gone. It's making time for delight in your own life rather than just checking off to-do lists. So in homeschool, that looks like taking time for a poetry tea time, or to read read, I don't know, I was going to say Shakespeare, but let's even do something more fun. Read the Penderwicks outside on a blanket underneath the trees, or to go, romp in the fields, to do something for the utter delight of being children of God. My daughter just popped out behind me and gave me a huge thumbs up. Like, yeah, let's do that tomorrow. Yes, exactly. Pam says the church year is so important in this. Living out the liturgical year of your church and your faith life. Taking time to do things that nourish you and nourishing your children, and seeing that as work of the highest order, not as what you do when all of the boxes are checked. And that really helped me when Dr. Perrin reminded me that God did not rest on the seventh day because he was tired. He was not like plumb tuckered out and he got everything done and now he can kick back and relax. That's not what happened. And so if we think we can rest and delight and enjoy homeschooling once we get our kids caught up in math, or once we get them get caught up to where we expected we were supposed to be by November 16th, you're never going to get there. And then we're going to end up looking back 20 years from now and realizing that our homeschool was just this endless toil. It wasn't ever that work toward the higher order. Making sure I hit those comments. Yeah. Yeah, you're never caught up. You never caught up. Never caught up. Definitely never caught up to your initial vision. Right? I don't think I've ever had, yeah, you can watch this on the computer. If you go to periscope.tv/am lovely things, you'll find it. Okay. If your phone's dying. There's a couple people who said their phone's dying. Dawn, you're 8 weeks behind. Yeah. Yeah. I've been homeschooling always, and my oldest daughter's an 8th grader. We have never had a school year where we actually hit all of the benchmarks that I set for us at the beginning of the year. And so, part of the problem is that we see, well, I can teach from rest anyway, knowing that the only best thing you can do for your child, and this is like my pep talk I give to myself. I'm just going to give it to myself right now in front of you so that you can hear me. Your child will not benefit. If your child is on lesson 42 of math and you had hoped they were going to be on lesson 60, it doesn't matter if you're on lesson 61 tomorrow. They won't understand it. It won't help them. It doesn't matter if you cram to get them caught up, and then they kind of frenetically just don't really understand anything, but now you're caught up. The only thing you can do for a child who you're teaching is take them the next step on the path. So when we're teaching our children and we're taking them on a curriculum, through a curriculum, which is a course, right? A pathway, all we can do is we can step alongside our children and take their hands and help them walk a little bit further on the path. But we can't throw them a mile ahead. And I don't even know why we're so intent on doing it. I am too, so I'm not judging anybody. I'm totally with you. But it's really helpful to remember that the only thing you can do for your child today, no matter where they are, no matter if they're 2 years ahead of the neighbor next door or 2 years behind the neighbor next door, it doesn't really matter, that you can only help them take the next step. Yeah. Yeah, there's some good comments there. I'm just making sure Yes, that's so helpful. I missed your name, Marissa, and 5. Stop setting those end goals, and I missed it. But you said stop setting goals that are connected to dates. So one of the things I used to do is I used to be at the beginning of the year, and I showed on one of my other scopes, if you go to sarahmckenzie.tv, it's in those How We Homeschool scopes. I show you, it's in the last one, the last How We Homeschool scope. I show you my syllabus for the year, actually. Hey, Allison, would you grab my notebook for me and bring it to me?
Which one?
My one that has morning time stuff in it, the polka dot one. Okay, so it has all of the things that I'm hoping that we'll get to this year. So, for example, I take our math book that I'm hoping that we'll go through, and I put all of the lessons in it on a little table. I'll show you. Thank you, dear. See if I can show you. Here we go. Okay. Maybe. Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay, so here's an example. This is just Audrey's math. Okay, I haven't updated this a little bit, but okay. So here's like Audrey's math. And so what I've done is she's in Saxon 8-7 and there's 120 lessons in Saxon 8-7, so I have 120 boxes. I told you I'm still a box checker. I still like checking boxes. There's just a difference between checking boxes and being ruled by boxes, right? So I have all the math, all the investigations and tests done here as well. So when she finishes something, we have the very adrenaline rush, happy moment of checking it off. But what I used to do is I used to color code these by quarter. So I used to say, like, I would take maybe 4 rows or something and color code it orange, and that would be fall. And I would put a date next to it and say, you know, I wanted that done by November 20th. And then the next set I wanted done by, I'm just throwing out random dates now, you know, January 15th. And the next set, and I had these color coded into 4 quarters. And I did it so that I could have a quick and easy way to see if we were behind my initial vision. So you see the problem with that way of doing things is that if my child needed me to take 3 or 4 days to really master a lesson, I didn't feel like I had the freedom to do it, or I felt this constant anxiety because I was constantly looking at these color-coded checklists or these dates next to the curriculum that were arbitrary because I literally made them up out of thin air. So it was silly. So now I still do this because I still like box checking, and it still makes me very happy to check off a box. I do it for math. I'll show you the other ones. Let's see. For writing, we're doing kind of a weird combination of things for writing, so this is not going to make a ton of sense. We're using the Creative Writer and the Lost Tools of Writing, so I've got it kind of. These are all up, by the way. You can download. I think you can download these at if you go to sarahmckenzie.tv and look at How We Homeschool and you look at the last one in the series, I'm pretty sure it's in there. So her grammar, we obviously haven't gotten very far in grammar. We've been doing other stuff. But I've got all the grammar lessons on here. We'll just check. And if we don't get it all the way through by the end of the year, then that's fine. It seems like a lot of work. Okay, so at the beginning of the year, it takes me, I don't know, an hour per kid. Okay, I'll answer that in just a second. It takes me like an hour per kid or something to put these together. But I need a way to be able to check boxes to count progress, because as we were talking about rest being the virtue between negligence and anxiety, I tend to swing toward negligence. So I need something that keeps me accountable and that reminds me that I have to keep moving forward even when I would just rather not. But I need to do it in a way that doesn't make me anxious. And so this is a good solution for me. And it takes me, you know, a couple hours at the beginning of the school year to do it for each kid. We don't use a whole lot of curriculum. So literally there's like 2 pages per kid and maybe 2 pages for our whole family studies. That's it. Shoot, I missed. Oh, why are we using Lost Tools of Writing and the Creative Writer? Because she really wanted to write fiction and poetry this year. And so Lost Tools of Writing is not fiction or poetry. And so we're just doing both, so that she's doing, you know, about half her time she's spending Lost Tools of Writing, which is essays, and about half the time she's using something else where she can write fiction and poetry. That's all. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. The list is like a map of where you're going next. Exactly. And it's a kick in the pants for me because I need to be disciplined in this area more than my kids do to stay on track to keep moving forward. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It helps me stay on track but not constantly feel behind. And it does help me. One of the things in Teaching from Rest that I talk about is baking and review time. We talked about that briefly last week in part 2. And so if I notice, I do these breaks every 6 weeks or every 12 weeks. This year I'm doing more every 12. Last year I did them every 6 weeks, where I have a break for a few days or a week, and I look over how far we've gotten and where are we getting in trouble, you know, are we not making very much progress in math? And I could look at my check sheets and I can go, gosh, we're not really getting very far in grammar. Is that just because we didn't really need it as much as we thought? Or is that because we're not making good time for it? Is that because we need a different program, or I need to ask my husband to help me, or I need to find a different person to step in for me? So taking a complete break and taking a review and assessment of where we're lacking and where we're thriving and where are we ahead, because sometimes we'll, you know, get further ahead in something, not very often, and sometimes we'll be really far behind. But if I just don't stress about it when we're in the thick of it, we're in the middle of a week, we'll just keep on, take that next step, and I know that going until the next break, whether that be 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever works for you, and then stopping and saying, okay, now I want to take a temperature on how we're doing. And make decisions not in the middle of a Tuesday morning when the toddlers are screaming and everybody's asking me where lunch is and it's only 10 a.m., but like on a break Saturday where my husband's taking over the kids and I'm at the library with my stuff out and a latte. I can think clearly. So I don't remember where that is in the book, but I can probably figure it out. Oh, here it is. I just saw it. Bacon review time. Nope, I did just see it. Page 32. So if you have not read that part, you'll want to go back to page 32 and read through Bacon review time. Okay. I feel like I'm all over the place. I had an outline, but I'm not really following it. I'm kind of all over the place. The biggest part for me in understanding what leisure is that it helps me remember that the work we're doing is work of a different order. When we're teaching our children, we aren't actually just teaching math. And we talked about this in the first book club with when we talked about how we're actually building a cathedral when we're in the daily grind with our kids. And it helps me to remember that my kids are not projects. They are images of God. And the work we are doing each day, no matter how basic it seems, is really work of the highest order. And so if we can kind of keep that perspective, then we'll realize that there's something bigger than just box checking, even when we're checking boxes. It'll help us keep that perspective. And it will help us keep our relationships first, which is really hard to do when you get into either a steamroll mindset or a negligent mindset. So when you just swing to either of those vices, when we swing toward anxiety or when we swing toward negligence, either way, we forget that relationships are the most important thing we're fostering in our home. Page 62. Tell me this. If you could have a guarantee that your child would be a National Merit Scholar and get into a prestigious college, have good work habits and a successful career, but that your relationship with him would be destroyed in the process, would you do it? Why not? Because you are made to love. That's why. We care about our relationships more than our accomplishments. That's the way God made us. So why don't we live that way? Why, come a damp and gloomy day in March, do we yell over a math lesson or lose our temper over a writing assignment? Why do we see the lessons left to finish and get lost in an anxiety-ridden haze? We forget that we're dealing with a soul, a precious child, bearing the image of God, and all we can see is that there are only a few months left of the school year and we are still only halfway through the math book. C.S. Lewis tells us in The Weight of Glory, it is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest, most uninteresting person you talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. All day long we are, in some degree, helping each other to one or the other of these destinations. It is in the light of these overwhelming possibilities, it is with the awe and the circumspection proper to them, that we should conduct all of our dealings with one another. All friendships, all loves, all play, all politics. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. That's from The Weight of Glory. These children entrusted to our care are not mere mortals. When you are performing mommy triage, that is, when you have a crisis moment and you have to figure out which fire to put out first, always choose the toddler. No, I'm just kidding. Always choose your child. The loudest one. Probably the toddler. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a math lesson. It's only a writing assignment. It's a Latin declension. Nothing more. But your child, he is God's. And the Almighty put him in your charge for relationship. Don't damage your relationship over something so trivial as an algebra problem. And when you do, because you will, and so will I, repent. That's one of the hardest parts of homeschooling. It's actually one of the hardest parts of parenting, probably, but because we're like parenting 100%, 24 hours a day, all the time, as homeschooling parents, we feel it really acutely. I think that overwhelm, and that we forget the children that we are dealing with are actually images of God, and that the relationship that we want to protect there is the most important thing. I can't remember who said it recently, but they said I think it was Pam, you're here. Tell me, was it Susan Weisbauer on your podcast? Am I blowing something here? I think it might be. Somebody said that the whole point of homeschooling, that you'll know you're successful if your kids still want to come home for Christmas. And really, at the end of the day, the relationship we have with our kids is the most important thing. Sorry, I'm totally spilling beans. That's what we want. We want our kids to want to come home for Christmas. We want them to look back on our homeschool 20 years down the road, and they're not going to say it was all perfect. They're not going to say, my mom never lost her cool. My kids are not going to say that for sure. They're not going to say my mom was the best homeschooler. That podcast comes out in 2 weeks. Oh, good. They're going to remember our mistakes, but that doesn't mean that they won't remember the beautiful moments too. And so even if you make a mistake, repent. We all do it. We all need to repent. That's another Andrew Kern, is education is repentance. It's turning around. It's trying again when we fail, because we'll fail, and I'll fail tomorrow, and so will you, but we're building cathedrals. We're doing something of eternal importance here. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully our love speaks louder than our mistakes. Exactly. Oh, Dawn, thanks for mentioning that. Yes, Rhea Berg and Carol Joyce-Side talked about this very thing on the Read-Aloud Revival podcast. So if you go to readaloudrevival.com, or you can look for it in iTunes, that's my podcast. And we did 2 episodes, one with Rhea Berg. That became pretty much a crowd favorite right out of the gate. And it's probably my favorite as well. It was so encouraging. And she really talks about, she really just casts this vision for what you're really doing when you're homeschooling. And it has nothing to do with getting good SAT scores. So listen to that one. That's by Rhea Berg. I can't remember which number it was, but if you go to readaloudrevival.com, sorry, I say that so fast every time. Oh, someone put it in there. Kara, thank you. Readaloudrevival.com. Look for the episode with Rhea Berg. It's called Reading Aloud for History or something, but it's about so much more than that. And then Carol Joyce-Side also did a podcast on there too, and I think that one's called Read Aloud the End or something. Read to your kids the end or something. Anyway, look for Carol Joyce-Side's too. Those are like balm. Those are really, especially when you're having a hard day and when you're thinking, I'm the worst homeschooling mom, this is awful, I'm terrible at this. Like, turn on a show for your kids, or an audiobook, even better, and then pop your earbuds in and listen to Rhea Berg or Carol Joyce-Side talk you through it, because they'll cast that bigger vision and help you understand what you're doing there. And I need to do that a lot. Okay, so before I wrap this up and take a few questions, I wanted to read. This is my favorite thing Andrew Kern has ever said that I've ever written down. He's probably said other things that are my favorite that I haven't written down, but this one took my breath away. This is from the afterword, by the way, page 79. School is not about school, Andrew Kern says. Homeschooling is not about school. It's about pursuing wisdom. It's about becoming virtuous beings. It's about soul transformation. I'm going to read that again. School is not about school. Homeschooling is not about school. It's about pursuing wisdom. It's about becoming virtuous beings. It's about soul transformation. We don't view our children as products coming off of a factory line. No, we view them as human beings made in the image and likeness of God. We seek to cultivate and nourish their souls on truth, goodness, and beauty by means of the arts they study with us in our homes. Given this lofty aim, why do we care so much if we have checked all the boxes we meant to check when we started the school year? How important is it really what grade level your child reads at? He reads as well as he can, so continue to work diligently at it. This is one of the great benefits of homeschooling. We don't have to follow a prescribed pace for a class of 30 students. In a homeschooling setting, when we are seeking to cultivate wisdom in our children, it doesn't matter how far we get in the 6th grade math book. Rather, encounter math every day and work diligently at it. The only time we really care about how our children compare to other children is when we're giving in to our own vanity, when we're worried about what other people think of us and the way we homeschool. You are where you are, which is very likely exactly where God wants you. So work hard every day. Value academic work because nurturing the intellect is part of what makes us fully human, but don't elevate it beyond its place. There are relationships to cultivate, books to read, oceans to swim in, forts to build, toilets to scrub, bills to pay, paintings to create, dinners to make. That is why we homeschool, because we want to engage in a full to bursting life. And I hope that we can encourage each other. We can continue to encourage each other because this is one of those long hauls. One of the things I know these experienced homeschool moms tell me is it is not short. Do not try and sprint this thing out because you will crash and burn. It's a long journey. So that's why we've got to hook arms for the journey and take the long vision and constantly remind ourselves. And work in, that's one of the things we talked about at Wild and Free this last weekend, is working in intentional times throughout the year to refill our cup, to reread books that encourage us, to listen to podcasts that encourage us, to fill out consistently so that we don't burn out before it's time. Oh, thank you so much, Christy. So I don't want to wrap up without asking again if there's any questions, because I don't want to leave anybody with a question that I didn't answer, and I'm sure I missed some. Yes, we are hooking arms through the scope. I love it. I love it. Oh, Scholé. Yes, thank you. I almost forgot. I left the Wild and Free conference before everybody else. That's why Alicia says she's bitter about my early departure. I was too, trust me. I was feeling sorry for myself the whole way home. Okay, so at the end of Teaching from West, I talk about Scholé sisters groups. And I think starts about 75, page 75. And a Scholé sisters group is it's basically a small gathering of women who are all seeking to cultivate rest and leisure in their homes and in themselves and in their homeschools. I see what I said in the book. I'm like, is that what I said in the book? Yes, deciding to devote yourself to Scholé, to cultivating truth, goodness, and beauty, not just in your kids, but in yourself, is deciding to be fully human. And that's just easier to do when you have friends to talk it over with. If I start a hard book and I'm reading it by myself, I will get to approximately page 10 and then decide I would rather watch a movie and drink wine with my husband instead, which is actually a good thing to do. But what I mean is that I'll bail on my hard reading, or I'll get discouraged, and I'll kind of get into that rut of just going through the motions, doing the dishes, just not really cultivating myself as fully human as I want to, so that I'm worthy of imitation, right? Because they're beholding me. And so being a part of a Scholé sisters group is... Pam says the Notebook is calling her name. Okay, shush. I was interviewed on the Cersei podcast, and David asked me what my favorite movie was, and he was actually meaning like the one that helps you grow and be more human, I'm quite sure. And I said the Notebook. And he didn't edit it out. So my shame has now been documented for all podcast eternity. So somebody at the beginning asked, can you start a Scholé sisters group online? So yes, how do you find a group? You basically create one. What you just need is, 3 or 4 women who are all wanting to dig into their humanity and just become fully human by cultivating their intellects together. And so my Scholé sisters group, Pam's here. She's part of my Scholé sisters. She's at ED Snapshots if you see her there. Misty Winkler. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you, Pam. We actually do collect, Okay, so my Scully sisters, there's too much I have going on in my brain at once. Okay, Misty Winkler and Brandy Vinsel and I, we have our own little Scully club. Actually, we talk on Voxer, so we might read something like, at one point we were talking through Norms and Nobility, and we would just talk on Voxer. If you're not familiar with Voxer, it's an app you put on your iPhone. We can talk to each other on it. Or we'd email or text or anything. You can also meet, Pam has her own Scully Sisters group in where she lives, and they do things like, they've done like nature walks together, and I know some other Scully groups have done things like have someone come and teach them. Like they'll get together once a month. They might do a book club one month, and then the next month they would do have someone come and teach them how to watercolor a flower. Things like that, you know, like teaching them kind of how to be more fully human. It's almost like a Charlotte Mason education for mom. You want to go to ScholeSisters.com, SCHOLE sisters.com, and download the free guide on how to start a Scole Sisters group. Yep, not hard. Totally as low key as you want it to be. Okay. I'm watching for questions. You're still overwhelmed with the knowledge that you feel it's your responsibility to hand to your children. I think I might have missed part of that one. It is overwhelming because it's huge. I think part of the reason we feel overwhelmed when we think of the fact that we're responsible for our kids' education is because that's massive. It's not because we're blowing it up bigger than it is, but in some ways we're blowing up our own responsibility. It's not dependent on us. God could quite well educate and raise up our children to be saints without our help. But he desperately wants our help. And he's called us to be formative for them. That's part of why he made us. And so I think a giant sleepover with me. Yeah, come on over. My husband would love it. I think if you're feeling overwhelmed by how big of a job you have before you, it's because it is a huge job, but just remember that you're not the one who's responsible for the miracle. You're not the one who's responsible for taking the water at the wedding at Cana and turning it into wine. You're not the one who's responsible for taking that basket on the hillside to feed the 5,000 and making it feed the 5,000. You bring what you have. He would never call you to do something more than you would be able to do without his help. And so he calls us to so much that we hit our knees. Oh, I love that, Misty Winkler. Yes. So Pam put a quote in from our friend Misty, who's one of our Scole sisters, and she says, the work is ours, the results are not. In fact, St. Jerome said something, I don't know where it is now. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. It's in the book. But it's basically, we are called to do all that we can, and then he takes over when we cannot do any more. Someone asked how often I speak. This year I'm speaking a tremendous amount. You can pray for my husband because I've been traveling a lot. But pretty much every month between now and July, you can go to amongstlovelythings.com and click the speaking button and see my schedule and see if I'm going to be around. I'm going to be in Texas, South Carolina, Ohio, Southern California, I feel like there's another, Minnesota in the next handful of months. No, my homeschool, no, my husband does not homeschool while I'm away. Most of the time, actually, funny Pam, most of the time I am gone on a weekend, so I'll leave on a Wednesday or Thursday, and my kids go to co-ops Thursdays and Friday, and so usually he just has to cart them. My co-op peeps are awesome. So they totally just let my kids come when I can't come. And so they'll a lot of times just go to co-op on the days I'm gone. And if not, then we schedule our whole school year around my speaking schedule. This year, our whole school year was scheduled around my speaking schedule to make sure that Andy was not trying to homeschool, because just keeping 6 children alive, especially when half of them are toddlers, is quite the thing to ask of him anyway. Yes, I'll be in Minnesota. I'll be at the Catholic Home Educators Conference in June, and yeah, check on amongstotherthings.com because I have a link to it. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you. You know what? Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Oh yeah, when do I have time to read? You know what? I have not been reading this year nearly as much as I used to. In general, I read during rest time in the middle of the day when we put the twins down. They used to nap. Right now, I am on a mission to get my toddlers to take naps again because they have not been napping. And my rule would be no, like I can't have my phone because if I have my phone next to me, I'll be like, I'm just going to check Facebook for a minute. No. So I can't have any devices with me. I just take a book and I can lay down for 30 minutes and just read for 30 minutes. And then I read before I fall asleep, although I don't get much reading done then because I'm usually so tired. I try to keep a book handy in the kitchen. So if I have a 5 or 10 minute pocket of time, or I'm sitting down playing blocks with the toddlers and they seem kind of happy, I can get in a few pages. I mean, I sneak it in wherever I can. So next Monday, no book club. This is it. We're just going to wrap it up with these 3. And that way I'll have time to answer questions that come in the comments on the blog. Because I know some people couldn't get their comments in on Periscope. So I want to make sure that I have some time to answer questions that come in through the blog. So I know, I'm sorry. I'm not done Periscoping. I'll be on Periscope again. I don't know when because I'm kind of sporadic. But yeah, this is our last book club. So stop crying. You're making me feel bad. Okay. You're with me. Yes, awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. And remember, you can watch any of these replays at sarahmckenzie.tv. If you haven't gone Teaching from Rest, you can find out where to get it or the companion journal at teachingfromrest.com. And I think that's it. I felt like there was something else I wanted to tell you, but I think that was it. So thank you, thank you. You're going to all show up at my doorstep for a slumber party. Awesome. Okay, I just love you all. You're so encouraging. You are just wind in my sails. So thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.